Five, four, three, two, one, and we're on. You know what time it is. You don't never need help from nobody else. All you got to do now, I see you, Belle.
Whatever you do, do it good. Whatever you do, Lord, Lord.
What's up, Gwen? You don't know nothing about this here?
All right.
Oh, how about this one?
Now, what you look like when you're doing what you're doing.
It's what you do when you're doing it. What you look like you're doing.
Express yourself.
Doing on the moon, y'all. In the jungle, too. Yeah, I could do all of those old dances. Yeah, that was me. Watch this one here. See, the thing about the songs of the 70s, you could do any kind of dance. If it was a dance, whether it's the Cabbage Patch or the, See, that shit hurt my neck, so I'm gonna chill on that there. Everybody hear me loud and clear. Where we at? Let me hear you. Where you at? Hi there. But everything don't mean a thing if it ain't the thing you want. Express yourself. Oh, do it good, girl. I got you. One time. To the left. Bring it back to the right.
Do it. Go on and do it. Y'all do it.
I had to hear that part. Okay, I'm late. I'm gonna get off it.
Express yourself.
What's going on, people? What's happening? As always, want to start off by telling everybody good evening. To my folks in New Orleans, I hope you guys are dried out now. You've had over 24 hours. My cousin, my daughter, all of them whining about how tired they are and how they can't move and this, that, and the other. I remember back in my day, our Mardi Gras till Thursday morning, at least 6:45 a.m. Yeah, that's how we did it back in the day. But anyway, happy Ash Wednesday to you folks that got your ashes. Now, I'm not Catholic, so I didn't show up drunk trying to get ashes. On a serious note, so much is happening now that I can't really get away from the politics, so I'm going to hold true, and I'm going to pick up right where we left off. And the funny thing about it, whether you realize it or not, this has been kind of progressive in its action. Is going from one movement to another, and I'm trying to explain to some people how this whole voting process works and how we got where we are today. So basically, again, I want to welcome everybody to tonight. So this is the big 2-0, podcast number 20, if I got something to say. So it must be true. Every day I hear people say that they are not voting. Ironically, this sentiment echoes a group of people who have the power to make a change and choose their leaders, but instead they willingly give it away. Sadly, this defeatist declaration comes from black people. What makes this willingness to relinquish their right to vote sad is the plight of black people here in the United States of America is directly related to voting. Make no mistake, it's as simple as we collectively pick a leader who addresses our complicated existence here in America, or one will be chosen for you. Saying he's not my president or I'm not into politics is a cop-out. It doesn't mean that you and your family will be excluded from police tax or that you won't have to pay taxes. It just means that decisions are being made for you, your children, and your children's children, and you did nothing. When something bad, let me slow it down. When something bad happens to me, I'm pissed. I'm pissed because at least I tried. When I worry about what type of world I'm leaving to my grandchildren and my great-grandchildren, I'm pit to the utmost of pissosity because those that look like me chose not to stand with me to make a difference. So without any further ado, tonight's podcast is titled Sheep. Your vote, your voice. You know, I always start with a kind of historical perspective because I'm a firm believer in history repeating itself. So when we look at things like the voting process, the Electoral College, because I hear everybody whining about their vote don't count, the Electoral College, this, that, and the other. Let's take it back to the beginning. Historically, the Electoral College was set up for two reasons, and you've been hearing a lot about this here lately. So I won't take the credit for it because I know if I feel it, it's not like that. I'm that much of a genius that I come up with these thoughts and nobody else is thinking what I'm thinking simultaneously. So I'll just say that there are a lot of people that are on the same wavelength as I am. From a historical perspective, black people were seen as chattel or property. As slaves, the founding fathers defined them as 3/5 of a man. But rich, sophisticated Southerners needed the slaves who were at least half of the population. And if you think about it, there were a lot of plantations where there was a man, his son, and maybe 2 or 3 daughters and a wife, and they had close to 100 slaves. So in most instances, we outnumbered them. So they needed those numbers so that they could get equal representation in the newly formed Congress. Imagine, if you will, Moscow Mitch never being elected because Kentucky was not represented in Congress, and therefore Kentucky had no voice. So I'm going to just kind of take it there. Number 2, the aristocrats that became our founding fathers did not trust the ignorant, illiterate, and uneducated Southerners, many who were fresh out of paupers' prisons themselves, to pick the right person. In other words, it was important to elect someone who would preserve the status quo of the elites, the aristocrats. Remember, back then, many commoners could not read nor write. Their signature was a simple mark or an X, hence the X by the signature sign here. So instead of creating a true democracy, a republic was formed with a fail-safe electoral college to ensure that not just anybody could be elected president. So we move forward a little bit and we look at the civil rights era, the relationship of apartheid and a global right to vote, because we're always talking about democracy like it's so great we want to spread it around the globe. The irony of black people is we were brought to a country where many times we outnumbered the plantation owner. Like a stallion or beast of burden, as we were seeing, our spirit had to be broken where we would accept our newfound position of servitude or slavery. Remember, poor Southerners had already been socialized to a ruling class of the monarchy in Great Britain. This was the root of white privilege in accepting their class place or their place in society with little or no monetary rewards here in America. What made the plight of American black people ironic is, once Europeans decided to build an empire in Africa, they protected their minority position by creating an African Jim Crow system. It was called apartheid. And those of us that are around my age, I say 45 up, remember when before the apartheid had been eradicated and Mandela was in Robbins prison forever and ever and ever. This minority ruling group protected their position by creating the African Jim Crow position that we call apartheid. As in America, the laws were created to oppress Native Africans and imported Indians to preserve the status of white privilege in the ruling class. Same thing they had done here. This formula of empire building was repeated throughout the Caribbean and South America. Now back to America. What happens when we vote united? After the Civil War, newly freed slaves were rewarded for their bravery, their ingenuity, and intelligence. Remember, intelligence, with full status as U.S. citizens. Though they never received their 40 acres and a mule, they were given an opportunity to vote. And on December the 9th, 1872, Picnic Benton Stewart Pinchback, for those that are like myself that are from New Orleans, here goes our Louisiana history, PBS Pinchback was the first black governor in 1872. Now, he only stood for a month. Then he was elected to Congress. Back then, just like now, white supremacists called the KKK pressured, and his election was overturned, and he was replaced in Congress, mainly because many of black were afraid to go to the polls and vote. Again, your vote counts. There will not be another black governor until, get this, Douglas Wilder in Virginia. And I feel like Forrest Gump because at the time I was living in Arlington, Virginia, and I got a chance to vote for him. So I got a chance to vote for Dutch Muriel. And I always laugh because when I saw the pictures initially, I saw pictures of PBS Pinchback in the Louisiana history books in school. And then when I saw pictures of Dutch Muriel, I said, damn, this looked like this is this man's grandson. So it's just one of those things. So I felt like Forrest Gump because somehow my life was such where I was in a place where history was happening and I had a first row seat to what was happening. So I got a chance to vote for Douglas Wilder in Virginia, and he became the first black governor in the United States since 1872, PBS Pinchback. More importantly, during Reconstruction of the rebuilding of America after the Civil War, the new Negro, he went from being niggers to Negro, had the power to shape his or her own destiny. In 1912, Woodrow Wilson was elected to president. As president, Wilson systematically reversed all of the progressive Reconstruction plans to integrate the Negro. History repeats itself. Two things happened during the Wilson administration. Number one, Wilson was, and I'm gonna just I never give away the plot, but for 3 weeks now, I've been planning to talk about Wilson and the parallel between Wilson and Trump, because I think it's important. Again, the man that does not know his history is damned to relive it. So I want to talk about the parallels because I see history repeating itself. It's not that I'm a genius. It's just that I'm a history buff. So when something happens, my mom used to say, And you hear me say that all the time. My mom wasn't an educated one, but my mom's had a lot of sense. So I learned more from my mom than I did a college professor. And that's why it's so important when we talk about women being our first teachers. But I digress. She said that you could learn more just watching and paying attention. That's why you have two ears and one mouth. If you be quiet sometime and listen, and yeah, people, I do pay attention a lot, you learn some things. So when you see things happening the second time, you realize I've been here before, and you're prepared for the situation. So you know how to act, you know how to react. In 1912, Wilson had a friend. He did the first viewing of a movie in the White House. It was called Birth of a Nation. Because of this, it became the rallying cry for the KKK, the Ku Klux and that Klan guy. The Klan went from a small group to this almost regional, a southern group throughout the South. So that was because of Wilson. The other thing that Wilson did by regressing or taking away all of those things that had been promised to black folks during Reconstruction, he stunted the growth of the Negro who was now starting to thrive as free men. And it restored white privilege under the system called Jim Crow. So from 1912 to about 1964, when the Civil Rights Act was passed by Lyndon Baines Johnson, Kennedy started, but he was assassinated in 63. So Johnson took over and passed the Civil Rights Act. We were now Afro-Americans, and we fought to be able to vote without the fear of being killed or beaten or killed, having our houses bombed and what have you. Our parents and our grandparents got spit on, they got bitten by dogs, they got lynched, they got killed because they knew the importance of making their voices heard via the ballot. It was the black vote that stopped Nixon's initial run for president and put Kennedy in the White House in 1960. After the assassinations of the turbulent 60s, John F. Kennedy, Robert Kennedy, Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, black people became disillusioned, and slowly they stopped voting in presidential elections. I guess they felt like if they could kill a president, then why even bother? Then black politicians started getting elected and white politicians started changing voting district to dilute the black vote. Truth be told, black people were never alone in their struggle, whether it was John Brown or some of the white abolitionists and with Ford. And so there have always been white people who are willing to risk all and lose their lives for not necessarily just black folks, but doing what they knew was right. There were always white folks who were willing to be called nigger lover and die to stand united, to do what was right. If, in fact, our Constitution says that all men are created and have an inalienable right from God for life, liberty, and the pursuit of property and happiness, then being my brother's keeper is not just a black thing, it's a people thing. So where are we today? Today, we have to talk about the black vote, minority classes, and the President of the United States. After women and minorities catapulted Bill Clinton and then Barack Obama into the White House twice, politicians and minority groups again realized the power of color in their vote. Suddenly, and here's where the narrative becomes interesting, Because if you tell anybody anything enough, if you give positive reinforcement, you tell a kid that they can be anything, then they grow up as I grew up. They grow up as I grew up. They grow up as I grew up, believing that they could do anything, having a sense of self-esteem. And I know I'm not the only one, so I'm not better than anyone. Again, that's what my mom's told me. She said, son, you're not better than, but you certainly know less than. So hold your head up, look people in the face, and let them know. Look them in the eye and let them know you mean what you say. Shaping the narrative, suddenly Trump gets elected. And everyone who had a slight notion of becoming president said, well, if he can do it, certainly I can. Truth is, it's not that everybody voted for Trump. It's just that a lot of people voted against Hillary. It is what it is. A lot of white women voted against Hillary. And they decided to vote for someone who was misogynistic and talked about grabbing women by the by their acute anginas. In 2016, 46% of registered voters, including disillusioned blacks, did not vote at all. This is what happens when we collectively do not vote. Iowa and New Hampshire prove. It doesn't prove that Joe Biden is weak in the polls. What it proves is that Iowa and New Hampshire is not indicative of America. So it also proves that the black vote is very powerful. In these places where we have caucuses, we don't have not only the black vote, but we don't have a true representation of the demographics of America. So we start looking at places like South Carolina, the land of Strom Thurmond, who incidentally I met on the same day that I met Tip O'Neill. And the two of them were good friends, and I'll talk about that another time. So I don't want to but South Carolina is the land of Strom Thurmond. And it's the first state, or the representation, this unique relationship between black people and South people, or black people and white people in the South nationwide. It's a true representation of what's happening. Not just in South Carolina, but nationwide, America as a whole. So all we hear is Joe talk about how he's been there and blacks are being there for him. As we continue with blacks in the minority classes, we see that a state may be as red as an apple, but every politician needs to entertain and needs to pander to, and they need to patronize the black vote. So yes, again, your vote counts. Many a Negro died so that you could have the right to vote. You may not know who Medgar Evers was, but what you see happening today is history repeating itself, and Jimmy Crow Jr. retarding the progress of your grandchildren. So I implore you, make your voice heard. Vote. I'm telling you that with all of his socialism claims, Bernie does not have the conviction to declare himself a Democrat, except when he needs your vote and there's a national election. So Elizabeth Warren capitulates and bows down when things get tough in Congress. She concedes and votes with the majority. In the last debate, Joe told us time and time again how she and Bernie voted with the majority instead of standing firm and doing what was right, their conviction. If they're convicted to do this, this is what you do, even when you're the only one standing alone. That's what courage is. If I digress for a minute, Martin said, the measure of a man is not where he stands in times of comfort and convenience. in moments of comfort and convenience, but where he stands in times of challenge and controversy. So it tells me who you are when you do what you do, when you're challenged, when you're in controversial or unpleasant situation. That tells me who you are. Having been to Minnesota, Amy reminds me of everything that happens outside of downtown Minneapolis and places like Plymouth and Eagan. They're extremely racist. Extremely. So I won't even get into that in her minority support. Biden. Now, I've been saying since 2017 that Biden was the best person for this job. I said in previous podcasts that when faced with the question of who was the greatest president, I said it's not that the man was great, it was that given the challenges of that time, that person rose to the challenge to deal with it. People like FDR and JFK and even Johnson and Barack Obama. And I've already talked about the reasons why I felt they were great. So what we need right now is someone who can rise to the challenge, who can unite the party, who can bring the moderates and the left wingers and the moderate Republicans and the independents and all these people together. In addition to that, somebody who has a reputation globally and can start putting us back on top. Instead of when our president shows up, everybody's laughing and avoiding him. It's ridiculous. More important, South Carolina proves just how powerful the black vote is. South Carolina proved just how powerful we are as a people when black and white and Hispanic unite for a common purpose. Just today, our Attorney General, William Barr, appointed by Trump and somehow confirmed by Congress, announced zero tolerance with police resistance. Give me a break. Has Barr never seen news clips from the 1960s with the police dogs and Bull O'Connor? Or heard of white supremacists on the police force or in the military? Has he stuck his head in the sand, or does he just not care? This is the other reason why it's imperative that we get the right candidate that can defeat this guy so that we don't continue to see history repeat itself and we lose the progressions. I'm trying to stay on track. So let me just kind of wrap this up. In closing, I've got about 5 questions I want you to ponder. So I'm going to ask you these questions 2 times. First question, if your vote doesn't count, why do poor white people vote? Even when they get nothing out of it, they continue to vote. If your vote doesn't count, number 2, why were our ancestors fighting to get the opportunity to vote? And let me take that one to a little further. If voting doesn't count, then why did Africans follow their black brethren in fighting to abolish apartheid? If your vote does not count, number 3, how did PBS Pinchback get elected to Congress and then get defeated when the blacks were too afraid to go back to the polls? Number 4, if your vote doesn't count, how did Douglas Wilder get elected as the first governor of Virginia? How did Bill Clinton get elected? How did John F. Kennedy get elected? How did Barack Obama get elected? So forth and so on. So we're going to leave that. Number 5, if voting doesn't count, if your vote doesn't count, Why is it that convicted felons, the first thing they do when they get their citizenship back is fight for the right to be able to vote? So let's go over those 5 again. Number 1, if your vote doesn't count, why does the poorest white people vote continuously, over and over again? Number 2, why were our ancestors fighting to get the opportunity to vote? Why did Africans fight to have the opportunity to vote, make their voice heard? Number 3, how did PBS Pinchback get elected to Congress during Reconstruction? 1872. Number 4, how did Douglas Wilder get elected as the first black governor since 1872 in Reconstruction? And number 5, if voting doesn't matter, then why do convicted felons fight to get the right, the privilege to vote again? I wanted to make this short and sweet. I apologize. I get a little with this because it's near and dear. And if not me, then who? If not now, then when? I want to thank each and every one of you for tuning in tonight and every night. I want to thank you for your time, your attention. I want to thank you most of all for your support. Before I leave here tonight, I want to ask you to do 2 favors for me. Number 1, feel free to tell a friend about the podcast, because this is not just relegated or selective to my immediate friends. I think it's important to get the word out. So tell a friend and feel free to repost. Number 2, go to my YouTube channel and subscribe, because what I'm starting to see is the podcast on Facebook always has some kind of blib in it. The one that I upload to YouTube is almost perfect. So I'm going to be taking things there, and I'm going to start to build the channel and have some things that are unique to my YouTube channel. So following this podcast, I'm going to post the YouTube connection with this podcast. So not only can you view it, and I encourage you, I ask you to view it on YouTube. Subscribe so that you'll know what's going on. Subscribe so that you'll know what's going on. Subscribe so that you'll know what's going on. And lastly, if you haven't already touched base with me, feel free to do so. My inbox, if you have my number, if you want my number, inbox me. And I talk about this because I get so much feedback from you guys, from those that are here week in, week out, participating and giving me their thoughts, giving me their encouragement, and telling me that they get it. They appreciate it. So I appreciate you as well. As always, important, I've got something to say, so it must be true. See you next week. Good night, people. Glenda, you always get that last one in. She plays Jeopardy. She makes sure that her comment is the last comment, so it's the first one that I read. She shares my birthday. You're welcome, Henry. Thanks for sharing your opinion. Hey, thank you as well. Hey, Al, what's up, man? Big Al. Again, excellent. What's up, Miss Davis? How is it going? I'm glad to see your face in the place tonight. I hope you enjoy what you see. And like I say, tell a friend. Good night, Sandra. You know, I know that you'll be here, and I appreciate you, sweetheart. I really do. So I'm going to just send out a few more shout outs. Miss Crawford, you're right. I know you agree. You're one of these people we always hear. She gave me the name The Brain. That's my Panky. So, you know, I always said watching the cartoon, Panky was not as dumb as people thought. A lot of times he would say the most profound things to Brain, and that's the way Angela is. She always said these profound things to me that motivate me, so I appreciate you. Sandra, oh man, look at all this feedback. Thank you guys, man. Hey, Michelle, what's happening, babe? Priscilla, I see you back. What's going on, Janice? A lot of these folks I've known for years and years and years. What's going on, Jordan? How's it going? Miss Gray, Glad to see your face in the place. Bernice, what's up? What's up? Liza, ha ha ha. One day I'm gonna share the story, and I'll probably do this in a follow up because I'm just running out of time. You guys give me your time, so I'm gonna just be. I'll cut it short. Hey Gwen, what's happening, baby? Thanks for tuning in. And last but not least, Beverly, nice to see your face in the place. I appreciate you again, your support. I got something to say, folks, so it must be true. As always, peace. You guys, good night. See you next week.